Lore Reloaded. Glad to see all of you guys here. Decided to do probably a short one. Depends on where we go and how much interest you show, as always. Before we get started, let me remind you of twitter.com/Lore Reloaded as well as twitch.tv/Lore Reloaded. But more importantly, let me go ahead and address something. I'm going to start doing this at the beginning of most all of my live streams because people get kind of confused. There are two sides to this channel. The first one is specifically the uploads, which are focused on lore. If I can bring other events into them, I will try if it's relatable. But generally, it's just Starship breakdowns, lore, analysis, theories, and stuff like that. Then you have these live streams, which, again, I try to make coalesce with the channel, but aren't necessarily 100% what I generally do on uploads. They will include my opinions, me being laid back, and talking about whatever comes through. So some people expect that this live stream should basically be like watching a video. It's not. And I would not encourage you to be here if you know, that's going to bug you. So anyway, I'm going to be taking a look at a video that was not a video, but a interview that was done by one Chabon, Michael Chabon, specifically about Star Trek Picard being divisive and yada, yada, yada. Just to give my opinions. I know there's been a lot of people who responded to this very, very vitriolically, I guess. Is that a word? Vitriolically? But for the most part, I don't know. Let's break it down and see what we think. I'm going to put this in the chat, but should also be in the description as well for all of you lovely people. What's a Chabron? A Chabron, I'm not sure, but a Michael Chabon is a person who in fact runs his own, not runs, but was the showrunner for Star Trek Picard. Matthew Strelitz in the house saying, wow, I actually got a notification for one of my live streams. That's awesome, Michael. Or Matthew, sorry. Good to have you here, buddy. Always a positive. I went ahead and shared it. Let's go ahead and see. As always, I'd love your guys' opinions or what your thoughts are when it specifically comes to his points here. Because there's going to be a varied take. And obviously, we got SC here because God forbid that I don't have someone who disagrees with me on my chats. So let's just get into it. So, this is Variety. This is done by a Mr. or Mrs. Mr., I'm guessing, Adam B. Very. He's doing an interview. And so we're going to look at his question and the response to his question. So the question from Mr. Very to Michael Chabon is, now that Season 1 of Picard is almost done, how have you been feeling about the season and seeing the fan response to it? Michael responds, or Mr. Chabon responds, it's been pretty exciting. I think it's inevitably I spent a fair amount of time looking around on Twitter and Reddit, you know, trying to get a sense of people's responses. Twitter's kind of a horrible place too, so I wasn't really encouraged to spend too much time looking around. Well, I'll agree with him there. But then I came up with this forum, setting up an Instagram story once a week to take people's questions. One of my children showed me how you could use Instagram in that way, and that's been really fun for me. As someone who spent a fair amount of time over the years on Memory Alpha, looking on Reddit, enjoying the way people enjoy Star Trek Online, it's been so fun to see the show getting absorbed into the kind of greater corpus of Star Trek. What makes me feel good is when I see it being treated, in a sense, the same by fans as previous versions of the show. So, the Mr. Very goes on to say, that does cut both ways. His response is right. Part of what you're talking about is, for example, the way that I felt about Star Trek The Next Generation when it premiered. I was sitting in front of my TV watching Encounter at Farpoint. Wow, he uses a lot of bunny ears. Watching Encounter at Farpoint, and I hated it. I kind of hate-watched it, although we didn't have that term then. For most of the first season, at some point in the second season, I realized, oh wow, that was a good episode. The show actually did get better. It takes a while to figure out what a show is. As someone who's watched a lot of Star Trek, you're comparing something that you have now seen once with huge expectations to something that in some cases you've seen hundreds of times. It takes a while for you to shed your expectations, your biases, your prejudices. I was prejudiced in favor of Mr. Spock, Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, It took a long time to lose that. So there's a couple of things here. I do agree that Twitter sucks. For the most part, the beginning and most of this interview that he has isn't necessarily all that bad, in my opinion. I would actually agree with a lot of what he said here. I wouldn't agree that there's any episode in season 2 of TNG that's good, but I mean, to each their own. There's a lot of bias that you do walk in with. In fact, that was one of the things I had to come to grips with, and one of the reasons I don't get so upset about Star Trek Discovery or even Star Trek Picard, because I just accepted that it's something new, something different, and it's not only in a different style, but for a different audience. I think you could say that of The Next Generation, too. The original series was done for a specific audience. The Next Generation was done for a new audience. And while you had a similar audience in Deep Space Nine, I do think that Deep Space Nine was trying to reach out and get the anti-TNG crowd to a degree. I think that they were trying to be not your grandfather's Star Trek, and so they were going for those who wanted a more cavalier Starfleet. The only counter I would say to that, and I've discussed this so many times, but the only real counter I would say to that is perhaps the spirit of the show. I think the spirit in writing Deep Space Nine was the same spirit we saw in The Next Generation. I would even argue that the spirit generally for The Next Generation was the same spirit we had in the original series. And even JJ Trek, let me say this, Abrams Trek, I think the spirit of that is generally in line or in tone with the spirit of the original or nostalgia Trek. But Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard is not. They threw out the baby with the bathwater in that regard. And so that's why it feels different, and I think that may be somewhat of why it's more visceral. I also think it's more visceral because we have Twitter, Reddit, and we're now all connected. I think we would have seen this in TNG and even the original series had it been that way. But to argue that the new Trek isn't substantially different, especially in writing and in process, is naive at best, a lie at worst, I guess. At least in my opinion. I grew up watching Trek, and there were episodes I'd like and didn't like, but it does have a special place in my heart. Yeah, if I give you money, you won't plaster my name all over Twitter, will you? Says Surf Trektonics. I mean, probably not. I don't think I generally don't plaster people's names all over Twitter anyway. Depending on what you want to do, though, I may or may not plaster your name. If you start a fight with me, call me a bigot or a racist or a misogynist, then I'll be happy to make you a superstar to the extent that I can. But generally, I don't plaster people's names all over the internet. Picard or Discovery are different because one show being binged right now, Battlestar Galactica, drama, sex serialization had a huge impact on sci-fi. If I'm reading that right, SC, I think you're trying to say that the Battlestar Galactica had an impact on science fiction, and that's why Picard and Discovery are doing it. I would say Battlestar Galactica and probably The Expanse both had an impact. And I would say they are that Star Trek Discovery and Picard are reflective of the impacts they had. You and I would probably agree on that, if that's what you're saying. It's been so many years since it finished. They gonna rocked better CGI. Okay. So here's going to be the ones where I start to get a little frustrated. But there's something to remember, I think, to be fair. We all have like our ecosystems, our, I'll say echo chambers, even if they're not true echo chambers. We all have the realm in which we live in. And I do think that to a degree that realm is based on income and status. And so given what your status is, you may get your introduction or what you are exposed to can be quite different. So I'm going to read what Chabon said here. I think we need to take into account that he is of the more affluent of our great culture, and probably hangs with crowds that don't give him full pictures of what he's talking on. Could the Orville bring the 90s Trek back? I don't think so. I think they're making so much money. CBS is making so much money doing it this way. I don't think we're going back to that. Maybe Lower Decks will do it, but it would be a cartoon if they're going to do it. Are you Canadian? My mom thinks you have an accent. No, I'm not. I actually live in the South, Tennessee. Though I don't have that southern... I can have that southern twang ever so often if you catch me or if I'm talking too fast, but generally... Oh, and you really hear it shield, field, guild, pilled. I can't say, like, shield. I cannot say words that have an E-E in it. Or, an ild in it. I just can't say it well. I have duplicate live streams and the other doesn't work. Just letting you know. How do I have duplicate live streams? Is this thing being stupid? Hold on. Hold on. Let me address that real quick, if that's true. Please hold. Because that's a big deal. Yeah, this thing was messing up beforehand. The stream can be accessed again from the managed list. Exiting will not end the stream if it's live. This stream can be accessed. Okay, yeah, so exit. Oh! Alright, hold on. They did something with this new system. It's horrific. I hate it. I wish it nothing but horrificness. Edit. Title visibility. Well, here, let's just do this. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry. Edit. We'll just make this unlisted. Save. There we go. I'll come back and delete it. Okay. All right, we're back. Sorry that. I don't like talking Southern to me is just, it's very, talking Southern to me comes off as uneducated. I really don't like Southern accents. And I don't like people who emphasize Southern accents. I mean, if you have a Southern accent, there's not really a lot you can do about it. But to overemphasize it or to revel in it annoys me greatly, let us say. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Sorry, I'm getting rid of that other one. All right, so let's go ahead and discuss the next piece to this. Babylon 5 has such an expansive story build from the start of the war to the line to the Shadow War. Yeah, I agree. They did a good job with serialization. I love how Stephen Ira Bear comes back and is like, we're the first sci-fi to do serialization. First off, they're not the first ones to ever do that. Secondly, they didn't really even do serializations. I don't buy subs Repify, so I'm not sure why you do that. In fact, that is against terms of service and would result in the banning of the channel. So, I don't know. I see you follow Mr. What? Oh. I find him interesting. I follow a lot of people. Guys, we're supposed to be talking about Chabon. I'll answer this, and then I'm going back to that. I find his information interesting. I follow a lot of people I don't agree with. Like Lindsay Ellis says a lot of things I disagree with, but she is a wonderful filmmaker, so I follow her. So just because I follow someone doesn't mean that I actually subscribe to what they believe. All right. Here we go. So this is the question coming by from Adam Very. And let me just... Okay, so Repify, first off, I don't buy it. If you have evidence that show I buy subscribers, please show them. I'd love to see it. The thing that you're talking about, if you look at them, most of them have PewDiePie. Most of them have Phil. Most of them have... whoever. I bet you could find Space Dock and Trek Yards and whatever on there as well. That's how they get around being banned from them. I don't. If you have evidence, you're more than happy to show them. But I get my stuff as honest as anybody else. Anyway. Where was it? Okay. So Adam Very saying, so you're familiar with the ways that Trek fans can respond to new iterations of Trek. Trek having bunny ears. All right. And this is his answer. Michael Chabon's answer. I actually went back and looked on Google Groups, which required Usenet. So you can look through the old Usenet groups and watch what people said about Deep Space Nine and then about Voyager. They effing hated it. They lacerated it. I mean, plenty of people liked it and loved it, but the criticisms that are being leveled against Deep Space Nine and then against Janeway, female captain, Black Vulcan, Tim Russ's Tuvok, all of the things that were problematic for certain contingent of so-called Star Trek fans back then, the way they attack each other and the way they attack the show, it's identical to now. They could just turn them into 140 characters or whatever it is now on Twitter, and you could make tweets out of them, and it would still just as well, it would still work just as well for Discovery or Picard. So there's a couple of things to that. Does he finish off? No. Here's the thing. I don't necessarily disagree with that one either, though I think it's kind of interesting how he tries to gatekeep. Thanks for the support of the channel, by the way, Bryce Hardy. I think there was a lot of issues in the past, and when you look at it, especially the things that were shared by Stephen Iron Bear, there was similar hatred to it, and I would agree that the internet now makes it a lot more, allows them to be a lot more, I don't want to say obstinate, a lot more upbeat about it, not upbeat, a lot more outrageous, a lot more in your face about it. But Michael is having some of the same issues, I think, that we see today as well. There are racists that are quote-unquote Trek fans. There are sexists that are quote-unquote Trek fans. And I think you can be those things and be Trek fans. I'm not like some other channels. But a lot of people will bring those things in together and just assume everyone who is critical or doesn't like something is that way. And I think Michael falls into that to a degree. Because, for instance, I am very critical of Janeway. I am very critical of how she decided to command. In fact, I sincerely believe that Janeway is an anti-hero. I make a lot of jokes about her being a villain and whatnot, but I think that she was someone who was put into command and then a situation that she couldn't handle. That she followed the Prime Directive in the very first episode and regretted it ever since. And then, because of her decision, she got so many people killed. She had to watch her crew die slowly over the entire series. And even at the end, she changes all of history and wipes people from the timeline to save a handful of her crew. And I would even argue that she's not worried about most of them. It's only 2 or 3 that she became friends with. However, and I've seen Michael do this, because I have that response, I am kept with the same people who would say, well, you know, women shouldn't be captains and women can't do what men can do and yada, yada, yada. And I guess that's the unfortunate thing, because on the face of it, I don't necessarily disagree with what he's saying here. I don't think many people would disagree with what he's saying here. But the practice of it is so antithetical to what Star Trek even is. It's just unfortunate, you know? Now, that kind of goes both ways, I think. Racist against Cardassians, like the Bajorans. Don't know what you're talking about there. I do think that you'll have people who try to dog whistle or who try to come off as reasonable or middle of the road, and then at the end of the day, they're leading you to a bad place. So I understand that. It's just, I don't think it's really all that conducive. You know, I don't think he is really embracing IDIC in that way. /Dash says, here's some bucks for your wife's boyfriend, Tyrone. I no longer have a wife. However, I guess I'll give $2 to my ex's boyfriend. They've been dating for quite a long time, even into my marriage, when I was married. Enterprise didn't call itself Trek until season 3 because its own makers didn't consider it Trek enough to be labeled as Trek. Discovery and Picard shouldn't be called Trek even as a part of the setting. I don't know about that. I've never heard that. I don't know. I don't remember them ever not saying it's Trek. I'll take your word for it. I'm not saying you're lying or anything, Zontar, but I don't ever remember saying that. I also think that it is Trek personally, but that, again, is just me. /dash, kidding, here's some for you too. Okay, well, cool. Both me and now my ex's long-term boyfriend can both go and get something off the dollar menu. 2 things off the dollar menu, in fact, at McDonald's. Thanks, /dash. Cool. So now I've had people insult me and give money to my ex's boyfriend, as well as say that I got all my subscribers by paying for them. It's a wonderful live stream. I mean, we're going great right now, let me tell you. Laura, the only way time travel would work is in a multiverse. So what Janeway did changed another timeline. Can't change prime time. She can from always happening. I would agree with that when it comes to Star Trek specifically, because Star Trek actually believes in hyper time. Everything they've done has, especially with time travel, has a aspect of hyper time to it. And so hyper time is whatever could happen will happen. And so, for instance, in one timeline, I take this drink and I throw it at the wall and it just splashes. In this timeline, I'm not. I'm going to take a drink from it. In a completely opposite one, I pour it on my head. Just anything that can happen will happen. So I'll agree with you, but only because episodes lead that way. Do you think that a Star Trek animated series could work, assuming a competent studio and company made it? Something said at the end of the Dominion War, talk about going back to being explorers. Yeah, I do. I think really you could do almost anything with Star Trek and make it work as long as it's done really well. I think animation is different, but that's what Star Trek kind of is about. It's kind of pushing the envelope. You know? I blame the quarantine for chat. People are going nuts and need to direct anchor. No quarantine in Belarus. Yeah, so ironically, that's not... a lot of people get confused by that. I think Keemstar... God, we're supposed to be talking about Chabon. How you guys got me on Keemstar? But... and YouTube actually has several articles about this. So Keemstar exposed a couple of big YouTubers for buying subs or whatever. But actually what they do, the sub places generally, is they will give subs to larger channels and even smaller channels, and then to the ones who are paying for it so that they don't get shut down by YouTube. YouTube's done quite a few of these articles on this. And so... Ha! Ghostbusters will be coming out. JJF, MDFL, those are coming out. Thank you so much. I'm actually not having a bad day. I appreciate that, though. That definitively helps my day, for sure. Thank you, man. And by the way, you're when it comes to Mr. Anti-Trekker, I think someone deleted it where they shouldn't have. Personally, again, I have mixed thoughts on Mr. Anti-Trekker, but I try to watch a lot of different people. And so I'll follow, even if I don't agree with them, I'll follow people just to get ideas. I try to be pretty laid back on that. I think sometimes he goes a little too far. But thank you so much. Ghostbusters, I think you've funded the entire first season by now, so I'll have to take a look. But anyway, you guys get me so off topic. One thing, by the way, while I'm on it, I'm thinking about doing a Starfleet Command quarantine, and that'll definitely be coming through as well. You're the best to troll. You're okay, really? Tyrone better. You like Tyrone better than me? Thanks, /dot. Thanks for assisting, Chris M. All right, let's continue on this. Let's continue so that I don't get off topic. So, were there things about Picard that you... Good to see you too, West Fox. Thanks for the support, guys. I sincerely appreciate it. All right. So, were there things about Picard that you knew you wanted to do that you could sense would test some boundaries for So were there things about Picard that you knew you wanted to do that you could sense would test some boundaries for fans? Sure, to the extent that I was aware of the kind of toxic fandom, the anti-SJW, sad little corner of fandom, you just disregard that. Okay, so this is me talking. That goes back to kind of what we were talking about. First off, I love how he says, the question is, were there things in Picard that you knew would test some boundaries? His first response is, oh yeah, there's definitely a toxic fandom that's going to get pissed off about stuff. This is what I'm talking about. If you're going to push stuff that'll test boundaries, doesn't mean that that they're toxic. I mean, let's not even get into the anti-SJW thing. I would say that if you're going to push the boundary on anything, especially if it's in culture, it doesn't mean doesn't mean they're bad or they're part of a part of some nefarious attempt to keep minorities down. People have a lot of bad ideas, but can be good people. I know that blows the minds of most, right? But people can be good people with really bad ideas. Kingzilla, so he's not a showrunner anymore because he couldn't take criticism? No, he left to do a dream project. Him leaving is not reflective of anything. He had a dream project he always wanted to do, and he couldn't be a showrunner and do it. And then we got SC, who's trolling me and says, do I think the Fandom Menace isn't real? Well, given that some of people who I would call friends, distant friends at this point, because we really haven't talked, but like Mecha Random or Anti-Trekker, or, well, not Anti-Trekker, but Mecha Random, or, what the hell's his name? He's really big and large, known in the thing. He runs a comic book thing. Anyway, there are people who I would say are friends who are a part of the Fandom Menace. I would not say that it doesn't exist. I wouldn't even say all of the Fandom Menace is toxic, but I would say there is a large toxic element within it. Anyway, going back to what he was saying, Chabon responds, sure, to the extent that I was aware, the kind of toxic fandom, the anti-SJW, the little corner of fandom, you just disregard that. Sometimes you're motivated to have things simply because it's possibly going to piss off or provoke people who seem to have missed the memo about just what exactly Star Trek is and always has been about. In the course of this season, well, first off, let's address that. So you're admitting that Nerdrotic was who I was talking about. So you're admitting and you're writing about things just to make people angry. You don't want to write a good story. You don't want to do something that's engaging. Or maybe you do, but that's not why you're doing this specifically. You're doing it to anger people. That is a very YouTube mentality. You know the reason why I use irregardless, besides the fact that there are a lot of dictionaries that say it's a word now? The reason why I use irregardless is because it pisses people off. I can get at least 20, guaranteed, 20 comments if I say irregardless once. In a 10-minute video, I'll say irregardless once, 20 comments. Instant reaction. And I do it because I like trolling the hell out of people. It's just fun for me. And so that seems like a mentality that I would do. Let's just make it because it's going to make people mad. That is a horrible way to look at it. But anyway, let's continue on in what he's saying. Going on with Michael. In the course of this season, we show the death of Icheb, who was a recurring character on Voyager, and then the death of Hugh, who was a recurring character on TNG. When we talked about it, we definitely had a sense of like, there's probably going to be some people who are upset that these characters have died, and we were okay with that, because we thought in both cases, neither death was gratuitous. Okay. The death of Icheb has now become part of the story of 7 of 9. It felt completely called for, and we couldn't have told her story without it. I mean, the death of Icheb is upsetting partly because it's fairly gruesome, which I understand, but also because he's so powerless. He has no agency. He's really a victim. But that isn't the case with the death of Hugh. He dies trying to do what he's been trying to do for his entire adult life, which is help former Borg. His death felt meaningful. First off, I don't think his death felt meaningful. He died because he poked his head out and he got hit in the neck with some thingy. So I mean, meaningful. But beyond that, in the course of the season, we show the death of Ichab and the death of Hugh. When we talk about it, we definitely had a sense of like, there's probably going to be some people who are upset that these characters have died. And we were okay with that because we thought in both cases, neither death was gratuitous. I have to disagree. I sincerely believe that you could write a much better story. Or not even much better, but you could write the same kind of story without having to kill Ichab. And you don't have to kill him in the way that you did. I don't really feel like either of their deaths were all that meaningful. And the reason is that, at least in Ichab, we didn't see enough of him. They didn't expand enough. They should have given us more of Ichab instead of 3 minutes of literal unreasonable gore. And it didn't really do anything, in all honesty. In order for it to be meaningful, you have to first have been very close to the original Star Trek Voyager. And even then, I think it's a stretch. Hugh had a little bit more. He did have an expansion, but the way he died was... it didn't feel like there was anything there. He didn't really die doing anything. He just died because they got stopped. I just don't agree with that. And people getting upset about that doesn't necessarily make them toxic. I just don't think the story's done well. Which would you rather remove from Picard? Eye torture or head smashing and banging? What are you referring to when you said the head smashing / banging? I guess if I had to remove something, we're going to do the eye torture. But that's the problem. Let me say, here's the problem. Kevin Thomas, and we'll go to SC. Kevin Thomas. They killed her surrogate son just to enrage her. They killed Seven of Nine. They killed Seven of Nine's son, Ichab, just to enrage her. And then SC says, come on, dude, you didn't get the gist of Ichab's death and impact on Seven in just that scene. I got the gist of it. And because I'm going to a movie school, we actually call it a film school in the industry. You might not know that. SC is why I got upset about it. It is insulting and bad writing. I am insulted both on a personal level, on an amateur level, and on a professional level. It insulted me on 3 levels, SC. That's why I don't like it. I think that you're trying to get it. It is literally there's a skit where someone's talking about how they take a rock and they'd smash it in front of audiences and nothing happened. And so what they did is they took that rock and they gave the rock a little wife rock and 2 little kid rocks, and that endeared them to the rock, and then they'd smash the rock and you get instant ratings. That's exactly what they're doing. They're manipulative. You know what I don't like about Picard? I just realized it's manipulative. It doesn't try to tell a good story. Some of the times it doesn't try to tell a good story. It just tries to instantly get you there without doing the work that it requires. Battlestar Galactica is 10 times worse than Picard, but you know why it's better? They took the time to actually walk you through the lives of the people. They became people, and then they did things to them. You know why Babylon 5 is better? Because it took the time to bring out the arcs of all of the different various characters. They didn't do that with 7 of 9 at all. At best, in 10 episodes, you get not even 20, 10, maybe 15. And those are in 3 to 5 minute increments that try to build the character of 7 and then just to hell with it. And they try to rely too much on Voyager. They don't go out of their way to bring it out. And yeah, I was insulted because it was concise, because that's not good storytelling. Oh man, you're messing with me. All right, let's stop. Okay, that one was legitimate. Breaking down Fizzle. Um, it oh, it wasn't a good way of doing it. Now look, that is of course subjective, but I think that there is, uh, I'm gonna say writing theory or story theory that can objectively explain why it's subjectively bad. But it really is for me, if they had went out of their way and taken an episode, and it doesn't have to be a straight episode, but they could have done like flashbacks and stuff. If they had taken 50 minutes and put it throughout the 10 episodes, they could have built it up and shown how it works, you know? They just didn't try, and that's just frustrating to me. Again, I will completely admit. And yeah, I would agree with West Fox. I think there's a ton of bloat there. It's not that they didn't have time to do it. I could have found I swear to God, I could have found anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes of unnecessary garbage that we could have cut out to get in almost every episode to put that in. So that's just me. So exposition is bad because modern day. Exposition is bad because generally you don't want to do exposition. It's show, not tell. Yes. I see. We agree. Chris M. Apologies if a bit off topic. Chabon mentions feedback not influencing season 2. Your thoughts on creative team balancing doing their own thing versus staying true to canon and fan expectation. We're going to talk about that. I'm actually going to go in that when we go through here. Who do I trust to operate on me? Crusher, the Doctor, Bashir. I would go Bashir. I honestly, Crusher, Doctor, and Bashir. Tito Kadigan. I get what you were saying. They did not go into detail on it. No, it's not even that. It's not about the detail. I would challenge anyone to watch Battlestar Galactica and then watch Picard and tell me which one did better at character. Even just season 1. And you might say, oh, well, they only had 10 episodes. If you only have 10 episodes and you don't have enough time to introduce all of the characters, then don't do it. It's really easy. If you don't have enough time to expand on all of the people and all of the things you're going to introduce, then don't. Don't at all. Just expand on the ones you have time to do it with. All right, continuing on. So going on with what Chabon said, I will say I don't think I quite understand that there were going to be people who would be upset about a character's death regardless of how that character died. The simple fact of the character dying, that was not okay with them. Even if I had known that, I would have ultimately dismissed it because it seems I just don't understand television in that way. Okay, so you're not a writer when it comes to that. That's fine. Not really a lot to add to that. That's just your personal preference. Let me see. I think this is the one you were talking about. Jean 7 was a good character in Voyager. I doubt you'll disagree. I don't like the fact that she just got a casual 7 that even Ryan wasn't sure about doing. Yeah, I think they changed her far, far too much. Let me see, because we were talking about feedback, and I want to get that quote. So, all this fan feedback that you've been absorbing over the last few months, has it informed on any level how Season 2 ended up being conceived? No, not at all. We're true to what my dear friend and collaborator and partner, Akiva Goldsman, calls the object. The object is Star Trek Picard. It is a show with a nearly 80-year-old actor playing a 94-year-old man who is, if not in the final stages of his career, in the later stages of his career, who has a period of great dismay and disillusionment in his immediate rear view, who has allowed himself to let ties that were formerly very important to him slip or fade away, and who has now re-engaged with the greatly changed world in which he finds himself. That is the story we're telling, and we're telling that story because it feels both interesting and true, but also because it reflects the nature of our star and both his desires and his capabilities. It was not ever going to be the Next Generation Part 2 in any way. It was never going to have a regular cast made up of LeVar Burton and Jonathan Frakes and Gates McFadden and Michael Dorn. It was never going to be set on the bridge of a starship in Starfleet. It was never going to be episodic in format. It was never going to be any of the things that TNG was. Not only couldn't it be those things if it tried, but it wasn't going to try because that's not what we have to do. Okay, so first off, I really feel like that wasn't the advertising. I really feel like the advertising was it's going to be a return. I honest to God feel like maybe not the showrunner, but I feel like the advertising for it was kind of there. Now, if that's true, I'm not going to blame it on Chabon. I have come to accept that the way things are marketed is not the way showrunners and writers do things. So I'm not going to necessarily blame it on him. It is also possible that everyone was saying it was TNG Part 2, and it just wasn't. But I really feel like the marketing said that. The other thing I'd say is definitively you can do Star Trek 2.0. You can do Star Trek 2.0 and it be something enjoyable. I think at the beginning, not now, because I've already done a live stream on this, but at the beginning, Orville was effectively a 2.0, if you will, of the Next Generation. Just a lighter, updated version. Now, I think that's an insult at this point because it's become more than that. But when it first started, I would say that it was. So he's wrong there. The next piece is more of one where I guess me and him are just going to disagree when it comes to how things are put together. I think that listening to the fans and letting them have impact is one of the best ways to write. Don't let it overpower, and don't let it change a story that you have in your mind. But if somebody has a good idea, why not listen to it or go with it? One of the funnest things about The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine was the interactivity that the showrunners had with the fans. They would have forums and chats where the showrunners and even the actors sit there and just would listen and interact, and it would even impact the future. And him having this idea or having this story, letting it be the object, as he puts it, that's not bad. That's a way of storytelling. But I honestly think it's a lot better if you listen to the ideas that people have and you go based on what they see or where they want. An example, and here's an example, and this is honestly an example of it working in a negative way. But because of the interaction with Ducat, they decided he was becoming too sympathetic when they were having their interactions with fans. Fans were becoming very sympathetic with Ducat, so they made it so he was unbelievably evil. And I don't believe that was the original intent, but they wanted to change it up because of what was going to happen. So a lot of people get upset about that, or they're like, oh, obviously don't like the fans. I don't know, that's not that they don't like the fans. I think that that's just a style of writing, and I think it's a mistake. It's a bad way of writing, in my opinion. I'm trying to look through here and see if there's any interesting let's address this for a second, because a lot of people have actually come back and used this. I don't know if it was necessarily against me, but they've somewhat kind of did it as a, oh, well, look at what the showrunners do. So generally, just for those who don't know, I generally subscribe to Death of the Author. It's one of many different styles and theories. I don't agree with everything in the video, but I think Lindsay Ellis does a good breakdown of Death of the Author. Ultimately, I think that a work starts being its own or becomes its own after it's written and it is out there. I don't think that just because an author says X happened means that's exactly what happens. So, for instance, if someone writes a character that is quite clearly a Nazi character, hates minorities, and wants to see the destruction of the world, if they say, well, no, that character actually was a loving character who wanted everyone to live, well, that's not what the work shows. And it's about what the work shows and what happens in the art that matters, not necessarily what the author said or what the author's intent is. So, I'm going to read this because I believe people have quoted this to me, but just know that generally that's not the way I look at things. And so this is Very, who's asking the question. He's the interviewer talking to Michael Chabon. His question is, in Stardust City Rag, there's an implication that Seven of Nine and Bejazzle might have been lovers at one time. Given the history of the LGBTQ characters in your body of work, I wonder why there wasn't any more sort of explicitly queer characters this season. Well, the way that people's identity is constructed with sexuality as a component of it, in my experience, it emerges in a much more organic way and not like wearing a t-shirt that says, queer power or the equivalent in the 24th century. We get to know these characters the way we get to know real people. It emerges in conversation when it would emerge in conversation. Like their parentage, for example. It's really important to me who my parents were. I'm sure it was really important for you, shaping your identity. We don't know anything about Girardi's parents except that her father read paper books and she used to interrupt him. We don't know anything about Rafi's parents. We don't know that much about Picard's parents. Even if you've watched TNG in terms of the show, it just doesn't come up. Well, that's not true. Continuing on, the question by Very to Chabon, he says, well, on Star Trek Discovery, it was a very big deal that Lieutenant Stamets, the character played by Anthony Rapp, is gay. So I think there's a certain subset of Trek fandom that was excited about seeing that perpetuate on Picard. Chabon answers, we're doing it in a different way. We're doing it in an organic way, what feels organic to me. What the hell? So organic to you is having Rafi and Seven of Nine hold each other's hands and look at each other, but nothing else, and we never see it before or after until season 2. That's organic to you. Okay. And yes, I understand that the two actresses decided to ad-lib that, but obviously Michael Chabon, the director, all of them would have had to approve that and said, yep, let's put that on screen. That's exactly what we're going to do. So you can kiss. Ugh, you don't know what organic means. I don't think you know the definition. We're going to reread what he just said. Michael Chabon answers, we're doing it in a different way. We're doing it in an organic way. What feels organic to me? It emerged in that scene between Bejazzle and Seven. I think it's pretty explicit, but it's explicit in a way that feels real. Bejazzle doesn't say we were lovers. She doesn't say we were a couple or anything like that. She says we were incredibly close. It felt to me natural. It felt like how somebody would talk about many years later, a relationship that was in the past. Here's my problem with that. Let me finish what he said. He continues doing. And it will continue to emerge. I think it's a part of our understanding of Rafi's character. In Rafi's scene where she calls into Starfleet to try to get access to them to the artifact and calls that old friend of hers, I mean, to me, the implication is that they're two in their relationship, but she doesn't ever say, I'm going to call this woman that I used to go out with, and she doesn't say, hey, remember me, I used to be your girlfriend. This is not good writing. I'm sorry, it's subjective. I'll grant you, it's subjective. You don't know how to write relationships in Star Trek. Look, I'll grant. The one thing I will agree with is that you don't need to be completely explicit with it. Sure. You don't need to be like, oh God, I love you. You remember that night in Paris or whatever the hell. I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. But you can't just say, oh, they looked at each other and said we used to be close. Obviously, they were always in a relationship. No, that doesn't. First off, there was nothing in my opinion with Bejazzle. You can say that you've been close with people all the time and not had sexual relationships with. Beyond that, there was definitively nothing between Rafi and the chick that she was talking to. And let me ask you this. Is that the only way that people can get what they need? Do they have to have sex with the person in the past in order to move forward? I disagree with that writing style. I simply disagree with that writing. That makes no sense to me. All right. Killing off Jadzia was lazy and wasteful. Well, the reason they killed off Jadzia is because the actress wanted to go on and do other things. She actually went on to a different show. They didn't want to kill her off. How do you think they explain in-universe Odo's death since his actor passed away? They may not bring it up. Odo didn't die. Odo's character hasn't died, has he? Don't you do this to me. Oh, he did die. Did I know that? I guess I did. Yeah, because I did a thing on it. I didn't. Oh, man. I don't think they'll bring it up. They haven't brought any other DS9 up. Man, we're losing too many actors. I knew that. I knew he died. Oh, okay. Anyway. Oh, you think the way they killed her off was mean-spirited? Oh, that's argumentative. I don't know if it was mean-spirited or not, honestly. I really don't. I know she felt that way. All right, so let's do this and we'll end. One of the biggest surprises for me, this is very asking, for me was how Picard took the Borg, the biggest boogeyman of the Trek universe, and made them truly sympathetic. Where did that come from? You've obviously never watched TNG or Voyager if you can't see how sympathetic the Borg really are. I honest to God. But Chabon's answer is, it really goes back to watching Star Trek First Contact, the first time in the theater, and being really upset by a moment in that movie where our heroes from the Enterprise are being menaced by the assimilated Starfleet personnel. And roughly paraphrasing, Picard says, you just have to kill them. They're not your friends anymore. They're no longer the person that you know. They are just Borg. And watching that scene, that is so patently false, right? We know that's a lie because you saw Picard get assimilated and then get restored back to himself, so that's BS. So now we have this clear mandate from Patrick for Picard. Anything we're going to do on this show, whether it's bringing back another legacy character or key plot element from TNG, whatever it is, it can't be the same as it was. So that meant if we were ever going to bring the Borg back, and we kind of wanted to bring the Borg back, we had to find a way to do it that felt different. And as soon as I looked at that mandate, I remembered this idea of looking at assimilation as a form of trauma. We decided to really own that idea and to really consider the former Borg's claim on the same degree of treatment that we would bestow to any other sentient creatures in Star Trek world. That felt like a really inevitable way to go. First off, I think that when you watch Star Trek The Next Generation, when you watch First Contact, when you watch Star Trek Voyager, talk to you later, Chris M. Thanks for supporting the channel. You really see and understand that they are victims. But you can't really think of them as victims when they're still a part of the collective. They are the enemy. But I don't disagree with the way he took it in that route either, in that I think showing it more as trauma would make a lot of sense. And it is realistic, and it's the way to go. There's honestly really 3 traumas, maybe 4, for someone who's assimilated. So you're yourself. The Borg finds you and assimilates you, and they put you through this horrific surgery where things are taken off and then things are added to you. You're a Borg, but you're aware, you're conscious to some degree of what you're doing, but you can't stop it. Then you're saved, and you have to go through a horrific surgery to have it all removed. And then you have to deal with what happened to you. So that there is, in my opinion, horrific trauma. I'm just here to say hi before I get muted by a mod who can't take a joke. McDud, you're not going to get muted. You're going to be fine. Stay here. Stay here and joke, good friend. You're not going to get... I will watch out for that. But they go through a horrific trauma, and they're now having to deal with it. So I like how he wants to do that. I can agree with that. I'll say that's not what we see on screen for the most part. They talk about it, but they never really show the trauma. In fact, they kill most all of the Borg without any real care. And yeah, like JGMFDL says, body mutilation, forced murder, lost time, prejudiced. Yeah. So, I don't know. What would it be like if Alex Kurtzman rebooted The Next Generation with Discovery-style writing and lens flares? How different would the TNG characters be? Massively different. That would be a bad idea. I hope to God they don't do that. Nova Snowpaw says, Lord muted me months ago, and I'm still here. That's true, Nova Snowpaw, which is exactly why you can be seen, is because I muted you. That's exactly how the system works. When they say mute, they really mean don't do jack. So, I like Star Trek. They didn't show the trauma. SC, I would say they didn't show the trauma to the extent that he's saying they did. They showed trauma, for sure, but I wouldn't say it's to the extent. I like Star Trek Picard up to episode 4, but after the 20 different plot threads spinning in every direction, it completely hurt my brain. I agree with that. Did they kill them? Last time we checked, Borg walk in space. Yeah, it's inferred that they're killed. In theory, I guess they might not have. It's inferred that they were all killed, though. How about a Star Trek series about a war hero from the Dominion War, leader of a galactic power, and lost his only son? Star Trek ROM. Okay. Romulans created the Borg. Species 001 is Romulan. I know some people have tried to make that argument. I more like the Voyager, where they actually started in the Delta Quadrant, and it started out as a small power that slowly started to build over time. Because I forget the species, but I want to say Viridians, but I don't think so. There was a species where the Borg only had a few planets, and they slowly grew over time. No, mute means make a sandwich. I do make sandwich for people. Did they kill them? Yeah, so I already answered that. They probably don't know that the Borg can survive in space. I mean, it feels like there's some things they don't know. Like, they space the Borg, and then they never address it, and they act like all those Borg are dead, when those Borg really could have been scooped up. It's never really brought up, and it's just frustrating. That's the whole thing. That's my biggest contention with Picard, is that they bring up all these side interesting points and never address them. Like, at all. Tomux Rose helping out channel. Quick side question. It's weird there's no mention of Dominion War at all to explain the state of the Federation of Picard. What do you think? They ignored Deep Space Nine completely. I'm not sure why. The one thing I do know is that, well, they ignored DS9, and it's as if it doesn't exist, like Schneeflock Monsoon. You know, you remember that guy? Like, no, we can't see him at all now because he, in fact, was muted, and I'm just randomly bringing up his name. Just like that. You mean the Vaudoir? Yeah, the Vaudoir. Yes. SC is talking, said Voyager writers didn't know about the Borg being killed because Janeway threatened to flush them out the hangar bay. So there's a couple of things to that. First off, I'm not sure what the original intent was. However, what I will say is that her flushing them out of the hangar bay gets them off the ship. She may not have been trying to kill them. She may have just been trying to get them off of her ship because they created a threat. And so that can actually be... Steve Flockmunson says, much sad. That's funny. You're not muted, dude. That could have just been her just trying to get them off the ship, not her trying to kill them. There's also a difference between a character in the universe forgetting and the writers forgetting. That English gent says, if you became showrunner of a future Star Trek show as of right now, how would you go about writing the new show? That's a really in-depth question that I'm not sure I'm going to have time to answer. What I would say is that I'd probably keep the style they have right now because I don't think there's anything different with the new aesthetics. My writing probably would be in a Picard era and more focused on a Starfleet ship and the issues that they go through with a new type of Starfleet. It would be revolving around, should Starfleet return to a TNG era, a TOS era, or a DS9 era? SCLLL, yeah, Janeway didn't want to kill Borg. Man, you are a troll, and you just take things out of context. That's your MO. Imagine if the Iconians and the Borg making a pact. That would be scary as hell. Scary as all hell, I might say. Would you enjoy seeing Harry Kim return as captain of the Rhode Island, or would you let his character escape the horrors of Pick? Harry, I never really liked or hated Harry's character. I'll be honest with you. Him coming back would be neat, but it really wouldn't impact me. I think it'd be nice to see him as head of the Rhode Island. I'd like that, but I don't care. I feel sorry for how Arium was a human trapped in an android. That would suck. How much of All Good Things should they add to season 2? I think they should have added everything and All Good Things, but they ain't going to do that at all. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I think I'm going to end it here. It was fun interacting with you guys, as always. I'm going to try to do these more and have more of them. I never know what to talk about, but you guys really just have good... You guys have good interaction. So, anyway, thanks for coming by, guys. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.